She walked into the training camp with nothing but silence and a duffel bag, barely 5'3", wearing worn-out sneakers. They laughed, called her lost. But when the strongest man in the academy came charging, she didn't flinch. One move, one strike, and the giant dropped like a stone. Who was she? And what secret was she hiding behind that calm stare? If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Now let's move forward. The morning fog had not yet lifted when Leora Mendes stepped through the rusted gates of the Durham Tactical Training Facility. She wore an old gray sweatshirt 2 sizes too big and faded sneakers that barely made a sound as she walked. Her only luggage was a small canvas duffel slung over one shoulder. No one noticed her at first. She looked like someone who had wandered in by mistake, maybe a new assistant or a lost student from the culinary school down the road. Around her, trainees in sleek tactical gear warmed up with loud grunts and high fives. Muscles, noise, swagger, it was everywhere. Instructors barked commands. One group was dragging sandbags across a field, another was scaling a wall twice their height. Leora stayed in the back, standing still with her hands in her pockets, waiting for instructions. Her brown hair was tied back in a plain braid, her expression unreadable. She didn't look like someone here to train as an elite security operative. She looked ordinary, but nothing about her would stay unnoticed for long. "Who's the yoga girl?" someone whispered. "She looks like she took a wrong turn," said another. Then came Callan Ward, all muscle and pride, 6'4" and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Better get her a mat and a green smoothie," he chuckled, elbowing his friend. No one corrected him. Why would they? She was barely 5'3" with narrow shoulders and a quiet voice. She hadn't spoken to anyone. She hadn't even joined warm-ups. Marshal Drevick, the head instructor, was watching from the tower above. Ex-Special Forces, graying at the temples and carved out of granite. He had seen all kinds walk through his gates. But even he didn't know what to make of her. Her file was clean, her paperwork complete. But there was no history, no record of military background. No red flags either, just nothing. At noon he made his decision. He stepped into the courtyard with his usual iron stare. Everyone snapped to attention. "We lost 4 today. They couldn't cut it. This program isn't for dreamers or tourists. You stay, you fight for it, no exceptions." He turned to Leora. "You, what's your name?" "Leora Mendes," she said calmly. "Why are you here?" She looked him straight in the eye. "To qualify, that's all." Drevick raised an eyebrow. No stammer, no apology. "Interesting." He looked at Callan, still smirking. "Ward, you're up. Time for a sparring test." Then he looked back at Leora. "You too." The courtyard fell silent. Leora didn't blink. "All right. No gloves, no headgear. First to yield or go down," Drevick said. "You want to stay? Prove you belong." A mouthguard was tossed at her feet. Leora picked it up, slipped it in, and stepped into the center ring. Callan cracked his knuckles and bounced on his heels. "Try not to cry, little sparrow." Leora said nothing. The bell rang. Callan charged. He moved like a rhino, loud, fast, and heavy. His fist came down like a hammer aimed straight for her shoulder. Leora didn't flinch. She didn't even back up. At the last second, she turned, not away, but in. One smooth step inside his reach. One pivot, one hand moved almost gently, a strike to the chin, not a punch, just a sharp, perfect palm. Callan dropped. Just like that. The sound he made hitting the mat was the only one in the courtyard. Then silence. Not a stunned kind of silence. A stopped breathing kind of silence. Marshal Drevick stepped forward, eyes locked on her. "What was that?" he asked. Leora took out the mouthguard. "Technique." That was all she said. Behind her, Callan was groaning, coming around slowly. His pride would take longer to wake up. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Where'd she learn that?" "Did you see her move? Is she even human?" Drevik was still trying to understand what just happened, but Leora didn't stay to explain. She walked off the mat, picked up her bag and returned to the back of the group. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She just waited for the next instruction. By lunchtime, no one was mocking her. Some moved out of her way without thinking. Others avoided eye contact completely. But Leora wasn't there to be feared. She wasn't trying to be a mystery. She simply didn't need to prove anything more. She had already done what none of them expected. She had flipped the script without raising her voice. Marshal Drevik watched her from across the yard. He shook his head, almost smiling. "She doesn't fight for attention," he muttered. "She fights like she's already won." The courtyard stayed quiet for a long time after Callan Ward hit the ground. Trainees stood frozen. The only movement came from a few heads turning toward Leora Mendes, now sitting on a bench calmly sipping from a bottle of water like nothing had happened. Callan eventually sat up, blinking, rubbing his jaw as if still unsure how he ended up there. Marshal Drevik walked past him, stopping near Leora. His boots crunched on gravel as he stared at her. "You catch lightning once, that's luck," he said. "Twice? I need to start asking questions." Leora looked up and nodded slightly. "Ask whatever you like." But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he turned to the rest of the group. "Lesson's over for today. Be back here at 600. Nobody moved until Leora stood up and walked toward the barracks. Then the others followed, still murmuring under their breath. "Did you see her stance? That wasn't beginner stuff. She didn't even break a sweat. Where the hell did she learn that?" Inside the barracks, it was unusually quiet. The mood had changed. People who earlier made jokes now avoided her completely. Even Callan, nursing his bruised ego and probably a minor concussion, didn't speak a word. But Leora wasn't looking for attention. She laid her bag on the lower bunk of an empty bed, pulled out a worn book and began reading like she had done this every night for years. 2 weeks earlier, in a quiet mountain town far from the base, Leora had walked through the gates of a small, empty training hall. The mats were old but clean, the wooden floors polished by years of practice. Her Aunt Rama was waiting inside, already dressed in her faded black jai. "You're late," Rama said. "I had to say goodbye to the trees." Leora replied softly, smiling. Rama nodded. "You still speak like a poet even when you're about to go to war." "It's not war. It's survival." They stood in silence for a moment before Rama spoke again. "You're sure about this?" Leora nodded. "If we want to keep this place, I have to act. The developers won't wait." Rima walked toward her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You trained harder than anyone, but you were never about showing off. Now, you'll be surrounded by people who live to impress." "I won't be there to be seen," Leora said. "Only to earn what I need. Then I come home." Back at the facility, Leora's presence had become a quiet storm. She didn't talk much. She didn't eat with the group or join in on the banter. But she listened, observed. And when it came time to train, she performed each drill with such calm precision that even the instructors took notice. She passed hand-to-hand combat evaluations in half the time others did. She completed a 6-minute obstacle course in under 4. She disarmed a simulated attacker without raising her voice or asking for help. Marshal Drevik watched her every day. He'd seen cocky rookies, skilled veterans, and overachievers who cracked under pressure. But Leora was something different. She moved like water, steady, flowing, quiet, but powerful underneath. "Where'd you learn that strike you used on Callan?" Drevik finally asked her one evening after drills had ended. "Old family technique," she replied. "We call it the reed bend." "And who taught you?" "My aunt. Before that, my father." "You've had formal training?" Leora shrugged. "Since I could walk." That caught Drevik off guard. "Then why is this your first time applying?" "I never planned to do this work," she said simply. "But life doesn't always ask what we planned." Drevik respected that. But he also wanted answers. She wasn't like anyone else in the program, and she hadn't come here for glory. He began digging into her file again that night. The next few days brought more tension. Some of the other trainees were convinced Leora's win had been a trick, a lucky move. Rumors spread. Maybe she had special treatment, maybe the instructors were testing the group with a secret plant. But none of that held up. Leora never asked for leniency. She never avoided a single drill. She never stepped out of line. She was just better. The whispering grew louder when she aced the psychological exam with perfect marks. During the tactical drills, she solved the mock hostage crisis faster than any team had in the last 5 years. She didn't shout, didn't boss others around. She simply gave clear, calm direction. People followed her without even realizing. They were doing it. One night in the dining hall, Callan finally spoke. "She's not magic," he said loudly, his voice carrying. "She's just hiding something. People don't move like that without a reason." Everyone paused. Leora, sitting at a small corner table, didn't react. "She's been trained since birth or something," someone muttered. That wasn't beginner luck. Callan stood up, still stiff from the bruise on his chin. "I say we find out exactly who she is." But before anyone could agree, Drevik walked in. "You want to find out who she is?" he said, looking directly at Callan. "Then train harder. Maybe you'll catch up." The room went silent again. Later that night, Drevik approached Leora near the training grounds. She was running solo laps in the dark, the moonlight barely catching her silhouette as she glided over the dirt path. "You've changed the tempo of this place," he told her. "I didn't mean to," she replied, not breaking her pace. "Exactly," he said. "That's what makes it real." He paused before adding, "I've seen a lot of fighters, but you're not just a fighter. You're something else." Leora slowed to a stop and looked at him. "I'm just someone with a reason." In the weeks that followed, the entire atmosphere of the program shifted. Leora's presence forced others to dig deeper, try harder, and think differently. Some admired her, others still feared her, but she didn't seek either. Her only goal was to finish, earn her qualification, save her family's training hall. She never mentioned the money, never asked for special treatment. But every time she moved, every time she stepped into a drill, she reminded everyone around her, you can't measure strength by noise, and you don't have to shout to shake the ground. The heat had started rising, not just from the sun, but from the pressure. Week 4 of training at Durham Tactical Academy was known as the break point. It was when most trainees cracked, stumbled, or quit. Fatigue showed in the shoulders, sleep showed in the eyes, and doubt started whispering in the back of everyone's mind. But Leora Mendes stayed the same. She trained early, stayed late, and spoke only when needed. Her presence was no longer questioned. It was felt. Even so, not everyone was convinced. "She's hiding something," one trainee whispered during a night drill. "You can't trust that kind of quiet. It's always hiding. A storm." Callan Ward, still limping slightly from his unexpected knockout, had become strangely silent too. But this time it wasn't arrogance, it was curiosity and maybe deep down respect. Still, there were whispers and looks. Some called her Ghost Girl. Others tried to copy her movements when the instructors weren't looking. But no one could match the way she moved, like she already knew how every fight ended before it began. Marshal Drevik had watched hundreds of trainees come and go, but none like Leora. She was the only one who didn't try to earn attention. She earned respect without asking for it, and now she was about to face her greatest challenge yet. On a gray morning, Drevik stood in front of the trainees with a rare smirk. "Today," he said, "you get a taste of the real world." The group fell silent. No drills, no warm-ups, just a field scenario. Full speed, full risk. You'll be dropped in teams. You won't know when. You won't know where. You'll have to figure out your mission as you go. People shifted uncomfortably. That kind of unknown always made people nervous. Drevik continued. "There'll be a hostage. There'll be a threat. You'll have 20 minutes to fix it, or you fail." Trainees were broken into groups of 4. Leora was placed with 3 others. Jude, an eager strategist. Marla, a strong but overly careful type. And Nico, a fast-talking risk-taker who had failed the last 2 evaluations but always bounced back. They boarded a dark transport truck. It drove in silence for nearly an hour before stopping in a quiet field near a staged building. No instructions. Just a countdown clock mounted outside the building's entrance. They stepped out of the truck. The door slammed shut behind them. "Let's go through the back," Jude said quickly. "We split. 2 inside, 2 cover. We keep communication open." "No," Leora said softly but clearly. "We go in quiet. 1 entry, no split." Jude frowned. "That's not standard protocol." "We don't have time to follow protocol," she replied. "We have time to win." Without waiting for permission, Leora moved toward the building, pressed her back against the wall and listened. Inside, a voice shouted. A second voice cried. She signaled. 3 fingers up. 3 threats. 1 hostage. No one argued this time. She crept to the back door, tested the handle, unlocked. In 5 seconds, she was inside. In 15, 2 threats were down. The third turned too late. She swept his leg, disarmed him with 1 motion and directed the others to secure the hostage. Time. It was 0:27:14. The alarm buzzed. Simulation ended. Silence again, but this time not from disbelief, from awe. The instructors stood on the observation deck, stunned. That wasn't teamwork. One muttered. That was leadership. Drevik nodded slowly. That was instinct. The other trainees who had watched through hidden cameras were speechless. Most teams had failed to even get inside the building. Others froze under pressure. Leora didn't freeze. She moved like she'd already seen the outcome in her head. Jude approached her afterward. "I was wrong," he said. "You're not just sharp, you're next level." Leora gave a small nod. "Thanks." Even Nico, known for his jokes, kept it short. "Remind me never to play paintball with you." They laughed, but the mood had changed for good. That evening, Drevik called her into his office. "You led that operation like someone who's done it in real life," he said. "I haven't," Leora replied. "Then who trained you?" She paused. "My aunt. My father. I grew up in a training hall." He leaned forward. "Why didn't you mention that when you signed up?" "Because it doesn't matter where I came from. It matters what I do here." That answer sat with Drevik longer than he expected. "I've seen pride," he finally said. "But yours, it's different. It's not for show." Leora looked him in the eye. "I didn't come here to be noticed. I came to succeed." He smiled then, just a little. "You've done both." The next day, a new sign was posted on the wall. Top Performer of the Week. Leora Mendes. She didn't react. She folded the paper and tucked it in her notebook. That evening, Callan approached her outside by the edge of the field where she always trained alone. "You're not who I thought you were," he said. She looked up from her stretches. "No one is." He hesitated before speaking again. "I was wrong to mock you." She nodded once. "Thank you." "Where did you learn to stay so calm?" he asked. Leora stood slowly, dusting off her hands. "I spent years training in silence," she said. "Silence teaches you to listen, and if you listen long enough, you see more than others ever notice." Colin didn't have a reply for that. He just stepped back and watched as she walked toward the training field. By the end of the week, everyone at Durham Academy had learned something. About strength, about assumptions, and about leadership. No speeches were given. No celebrations held. But people looked at Leora differently now. She had become more than a mystery. She had become a measure. Trainees timed themselves against her drills. They asked her quietly for advice. Some even joined her early morning runs, hoping to learn through imitation. And Leora? She kept going. Her mission was still the same. Earn the certification, return home, and save her family's training hall. But along the way, something unexpected had happened. Without ever asking for it, without ever demanding attention, Leora Mendes had become the one everyone followed. Not because she was loud, but because she was undeniable. The morning of the final evaluation arrived like the quiet before a storm. The air at Durham Tactical Academy was still, heavy with the weight of expectation. Every trainee knew what was coming. A full-scale real-time field operations simulation. The final test. The one that separated those who got through from those who truly earned their place. Leora Mendes stood near the edge of the compound, tying her hair back with the same calm she carried from day one. Her uniform was clean but plain. No extra gear. No flashy patches. Just function, as always. Behind her, the others were buzzing, checking weapons, reviewing strategies, muttering. Prayers. For many, this test was their chance to prove they belonged. For Leora, it was something simpler. A finish line. One she never expected to reach under a spotlight. But now everyone was watching her. Even the instructors, especially Marshal Drevik, who had come to trust Leora's quiet brilliance, stood a little taller when she passed. She wasn't loud, and yet her name had become the loudest in the camp. Teams were assigned randomly. Leora was grouped with Samir, a steady, reliable analyst. Talia, a medic in training with a calm under pressure. And surprisingly, Callan Ward. There had been tension between them once, before she dropped him with a single strike. But things had changed. Respect had replaced ego. Now they were allies. The mission was simple on paper. Enter a simulated village, extract a hostage, avoid civilian casualties, neutralize the threat. Of course, nothing was simple in training like this. They moved quietly through the trees. Leora led without saying she was leading. Her eyes scanned every shadow, every branch, reading the landscape like it was a language she'd always known. Samir handled the drone feed. Talia monitored vitals and signs of stress. Callan watched their backs. As they approached the target building, they heard shouting. Inside, the hostage and a professional actor screamed for help. The simulation was designed to trigger panic, fear, distraction. But Leora didn't rush. She counted the voices, measured the timing. When one of the threats stepped outside, she signaled. Callan acted fast, grabbing and silencing him without raising an alarm. They moved in clean. The hostage was secured, the threats disabled. No unnecessary moves, no panic, not even a scratch. Time. 1 minute, 47 seconds. When the siren sounded, the operation ended. A voice came over the loudspeaker. Exercise complete. Team Blue, report to command. Back at the control center, instructors reviewed the footage. One of them said, I didn't even see her give orders. Drevik replied, she doesn't give orders. She gives direction just enough. And they follow her without needing to be told. Graduation came 2 days later. The trainees stood in formation. Their uniforms now bore the academy crest. Some smiled wide, some looked nervous. And then there was Leora. She stood with the same stillness she had brought to every drill, every lesson, every test. When Drevik stepped up to the podium, he cleared his throat and said something no one expected. Most of you came here to prove something. To yourselves, to others. But one of you came here without noise, without show, and changed this place anyway. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. Everyone looked at her. Leora Mendes stepped forward. She walked quietly to the front. We don't usually name a top graduate, Drevik continued. But sometimes, it's not about tradition. It's about truth. He paused. You didn't just pass. You raised the standard. Quietly. Without ever asking for it. He held out a small plaque. Nothing fancy. Just her name engraved with the words, earned, not given. She nodded, took it, with both hands and stepped back in line. No speech, no tears, just Leora. 2 weeks later, far from the academy, the mountains rolled gently beneath a warm sky. The old training hall where Leora grew up still stood, though the sign had faded and the roof sagged a little more than it used to. But it was still hers. Still home. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. Dust greeted her along with the quiet scent of worn mats and old wood. The same floorboards her father once swept. The same space where she had fallen, failed, learned, and now she was back. Not as a student, but as a guardian. Her certification from the academy came with more than a title. It came with opportunity. She had earned a full scholarship to start a certified martial arts and tactical training program in her community. Fully funded. She didn't need to sell the land anymore. She could rebuild. But more than that, she could teach. 1 week after reopening the hall, the first student arrived. She was small, maybe 10 years old. Nervous, clutching her backpack tightly, Leora greeted her at the door with a soft smile. "You here to train?" she asked. The girl nodded slowly. "I'm not strong, though." Leora knelt beside her, her voice gentle. "That's okay. You don't need to be strong to begin. You just need to begin." The girl smiled back. As the weeks passed, more came. Kids, teens, even a few adults who had heard the story of the woman who dropped a giant in one move and didn't brag about it. Leora never told them the story herself, but the story spread anyway. It grew, little by little, person by person. People came to the hall not just to learn how to defend themselves, but to learn something deeper. That strength isn't always loud. That power doesn't need an audience. That courage can come wrapped in calm. 1. Afternoon, as she cleaned the mat, Leora opened a letter. It was from Marshal Drevick. Inside, a simple message. "If you ever want to teach here, we have a space. We need more like you." She folded the letter and smiled, but her eyes drifted to the young students practicing basic forms in the corner. She placed the letter on her desk and walked toward them. Not to leave, but to lead. Not with noise, but with presence. Leora Mendes never became a celebrity. She never gave interviews, never stood under bright lights. But her name, whispered in training camps in small towns, meant something. To those who felt small, to those who had been overlooked, to those who thought quiet meant weak. She was proof it didn't.